Welcome back to Scalable Machine Learning. And this is our 4th week. And we will study clustering. Let me share the slides with you. So this week, we will study scalable k-means clustering. We will start with an introduction to cluster analysis in general, and then study the most popular k-means clustering in detail. We will identify the limitations of k-means clustering, and then move on to scalable versions of k-means. And finally, we look at the implementation of k-means in Spark and the limitations of k-means and ways to overcome the limitations. So let's start with an introduction to the clustering problem. We have studied clustering briefly in the MLAI module. So clustering is an unsupervised learning problem. We have a set of data points, and the objective is to separate these data points into different groups, which is called clusters. The objective is to have the intra-cluster distance to be minimized. So they will be very compact. And the inter-cluster distances will be maximized. So they are well separated. And if you recall this table from MLAI, and you can identify the relationship between clustering and other problems. We can view clustering as a kind of classification without labeled data. So basically, you can view the clusters as kind of classes. And we can also view clustering as an extreme case of dimensionality reduction. That is a reduction to the dimension of 1. That is the cluster index. So cluster analysis is to divide the data into clusters so that they will be meaningful and useful in practice. As we have seen, clusters can be viewed as pseudo classes. And they are key for exploratory data analysis in many areas. For example, in brain parcellation, in social network analysis, actually in many other types of network analysis, clustering is an essential task. And in businesses, customer segmentation is also a clustering problem. Clustering can be also used for patient stratification, drug discovery, and many other applications. Another application of clustering is anomaly detection or outlier detection. Anomalies are data points that are very different from all the others. Anomaly detection has many applications, for example, in credit card fraud detection, in network intrusion detection, or detection of unknown virus. Also, ecosystem disturbance, unusual symptoms, and many other applications. So we can use clustering for anomaly detection. So for an anomaly detection based on clustering, we can follow the following steps. We can first cluster the data points into several clusters. And then those in small clusters will be the candidate outliers, such as these in red circles. So they are the candidate outliers. And then we can compute the distance between these candidate points and those non-candidate clusters, such as this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then the candidate points that are far from all the other non-candidate points are most likely to be outliers. So this is a simple clustering-based anomaly detection algorithm. There are two ways to do clustering. One is called hierarchical clustering, and another is called partitional clustering. In hierarchical clustering, the clusters are nested as a hierarchical tree, such as this. So they are nested. This is one big cluster. And then this is another one. And this is another one, but there's a small clusters inside of the big clusters. And you can have further clusters over here. So each node in that tree will be a cluster, and except for those leaf nodes. And then each cluster is basically a union of its children, which are the subclusters. The root of the tree will be a bigger cluster containing all the data points, such as this big cluster. Another kind of clustering is called partitional clustering. In partitional clustering, there are no clusters that overlap with each other. So they have non-overlapping clusters. No clusters will overlap with each other. Therefore, each data point is in exactly one cluster. And so for the hierarchical clustering, depend on which level you are viewing, one data point can be in this cluster, it can also in this green cluster, and also in this big yellow cluster, right? So each data point can have multiple cluster membership, but in partitional clustering, each data point belongs to only one cluster. So that is the difference between hierarchical and partitional clustering. So this is a traditional hierarchical clustering. And you can see from here, so each time only, so the difference between the two adjacent clusters are different by only one data point. So this traditional hierarchical clustering will have a traditional dendrogram look like this. So it is have a very regular structure. So always there's only one point, right, when you separate the class. And so this is traditional hierarchical clustering. And for non-traditional clustering, so the difference between two adjacent clusters can be more than 1 point, such as here, right? So P1 and P2 are one cluster, and P3 and P4 are one cluster. And therefore, this will lead to a non-traditional dendrogram look like this, right? So the difference between next two levels are not 1 point, but more than 1 point. So there's a relationship between hierarchical and partitional clustering. We can view hierarchical clustering as a sequence of partitional clustering, cutting the hierarchical tree at a particular level. Let's take the non-traditional dendrogram as an example. If we cut the tree at this level, indicated by this red line, then we will have a partitional clustering with P1 and P2 form one cluster, and P3 and P4 form another cluster. And if you cut over here, there will be 4 clusters, right? So basically, how many branches you are cutting will determine how many clusters you have. And therefore, if you cut it at here, you will have basically 4 small clusters with 1 point for each cluster. Right? So therefore, we can view hierarchical clustering as a sequence of partitional clustering. And there's another way of viewing the clusters. One type of clusters are called center or prototype-based clusters. So in this type of clusters, data points in a cluster are closer. That is, they are more similar to the center of that cluster than to the center of any other clusters. So the center is typically called centroid, which is the average of all the points in a cluster. And in some cases, for example, for categorical features or variables, the center can be a midoid, which will be the most representative point of a cluster. That in the categorical cases, you can't take average. So you just take the most representative points as the midoid. So these are typical examples of center-based clusters. So here we have, if we cluster these points to 4 clusters, we have 4 center-based clusters as indicated by different colors over here. There's another type of clusters, density-based clusters. So here, the cluster is defined as a dense region of points separated by low density regions from other regions of high density. So here is an example of many data points. And if we use density-based clustering, so they are considered to have 6 clusters. So this is one cluster because they are very high in density. And this is another one, this third one. And these 2, because they are connected, so they have high density, so they are considered as one cluster. And density-based clustering will be used when the clusters are irregular, such as this one, or intertwined, or when the noise and outliers are present. Because if there are noise, for example, you can view the low density regions as noise, or there will be some outliers, they will typically have lower density. So they will not be clustered. So this is density-based clustering. So that gives you a high-level view of clustering and different type of clusters. And in the next section, we will look at the most popular clustering algorithm, the k-means clustering.